Hello everybody, welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're going to be talking about roster changes for North America coming into stage number 2 of 2024 for Rainbow Six Siege. So first up we have Beast Coast, the only team with no changes to their playing roster, but their staff has changed up. They lost their coach, they lost their analyst, and I haven't actually heard who they're getting to replace either of them. Maybe they haven't found a replacement. If you heard any detail on any of that, please let me know in the comments. Would be appreciated. And as far as what to expect from the team, they are the reigning major champions if you count just official Ubisoft competition. Of course, there has been the Esports World Cup since then, which they failed to qualify for. A bit of that is on the team, a bit of that I would say is also on the structure of the qualifiers, but regardless, one of the stronger teams in North America, one of the teams to look out for in that regard as far as teams that could qualify for and go deep in international events. But most teams, after they win a big event, fall off for a variety of reasons, big target on their backs, lack of motivation, whatever the case. So we'll see what these guys do. I'll be watching them quite a bit because they're one of my favorite teams. And of course, being the major champions, that's always exciting to watch what they'll do next. Okay, let's move on to Space Station. And I have this one early because while it is a pretty exciting change, it happened a little while ago. We've already seen it in effect. Benjamaster replacing Iconic. Benja played the Esports World Cup qualifiers with them. He played the actual event. He's played in at least one off-season tournament with them. So we've seen quite a few reps, and this might play well for Space Station in that they have those reps as this 5-man roster. Some of the other teams, they made these changes and, I guess they're getting their scrims in or whatever. But SSG with Benja on the roster, they have those actual game day reps to fall back on. It could hurt them a little bit in that there is VOD on this team. People can look at what they do, try to counter strat them, things like that. But they look pretty solid. J90 plus Ashen plus Benjamaster, I think easily one of the most fearsome fragging cores in the entire world. These are some really, really talented players. And yeah, watch these guys because they are a really good team. Probably one of the better teams internationally for NA. Fingers crossed sort of thing. There's always the chance of a fall off, but also because they are just a really exciting team to watch, both their play style and the energy that they bring. Next up, we have Los. A lot of people hate this team, partially because they were really bad last stage, and mostly because they are a team of full Brazilian imports playing in the North American League. It seems like they should be getting better. They dropped seemingly their two worst players in Rise and Bursa. And technically, Bursa hasn't been dropped according to Liquipedia. He's still on there. They have 6 players. So I don't know if he shows up on game day, don't try to fight me, but it seems like that's what's happened. And these two have been replaced by Arthur and Wizard, coming over from E1 and Ninjas in Pajamas respectively. They bring a lot more experience onto the roster. Arthur just played in Manchester. Wizard has played a bunch of international events with NIP, joining Sexy Cake. Quite a bit of experience on this team now, joining the not full-fledged rookies of Furious and Legacy, but stage 1 was their first stage. So I think it's entirely possible these guys don't get last this time around. Maybe somehow they make the major. I think that still feels like a little bit of a far cry, but we'll see. Maybe Arthur and Wizard will really turn these guys around. Then we have M80, and I guess these guys are just allergic to picking up new talent. M80, in the entire time they've been in Siege, has never picked up a new player. They've only ever picked up proven talent. They picked up the Exit roster at first, which was pretty hot at the time. They brought on Iconic and Spoit. Iconic had been in a major grand final before. Spoit was a major champion. They now have Citizen, who is a former Pro League season final champion. He's made at least one major top 4. Kino's also played in a major top 4. Cameraman is a major champion. And again, Hyper is a major champion. He won in Charlotte with Dark Zero, but you do have to wonder how far away he is from the peak of his career. He was probably one of the best players in the world around 2019, 2020, but that was a long time ago. And again, even when he won in Charlotte, it was Pambazoo and NJR, the two real shining lights on the team. Not that Hyper got carried by any means. I'm sure he was a big role player, but certainly those were the two stars of the show at that point. And then he had a bit of an unceremonious exit from Dark Zero, and now he's back. So I'm not convinced this is going to be a phenomenal change. I believe they probably could have made a better change, but I'm prepared to be proven wrong. Maybe Hyper is going to go beast mode. I would love to see it, but I'm not convinced until I do see it happen. Next up, we have Wildcard, and they changed their logo. They also changed a couple of their players, Vertical and Rampy being dropped for Spiff and Bay. Funnily enough, Vertical went to Karn & Co, where Spiff came from. And I don't know if that's like a permanent addition or if that was just for this offseason. I guess the Karn & Co roster sort of rotates all the time. These are the two players that I would have dropped if I was making the decision for a wild card and I had to drop two players. A little bit contentious the way Rampy was dropped, but that's not really what we're here to discuss. And I commend them for taking a shot on, I say new talent. Bay is brand new to T1. I guess Spiff's actually been on a variety of T1 teams like Parabellum, Beast Coast, and I think most notably Astralis, where he was on the team when they made that run all the way to top 4 at an SI a little while ago. So we'll see what happens. I was pretty hyped for these guys in stage 1. I thought they would do a lot better than they ended up doing. They also didn't look phenomenal in the offseason, getting even a little bit embarrassed in their own tournament wildcard restart, but I'm not writing these guys off. And again, I do like the fact that they're taking a shot on sort of newer, younger talent, but I'm going to need some convincing. I am a really big Bosco fan. He might be my favorite player of all time, and Kansan continues to be a monster. Like every game I watch, I swear this guy's going double positive, but anyways, I'm not sold on wildcard, but I could be shortly. Next up is Oxygen, another team that I was pretty hyped for coming into stage number 1. I thought it was their time to make the comeback, and this org, they just haven't been to an international event in quite some time. It was rumored that they were going to be leaving Siege before this stage. It's now rumored that they're going to be leaving after. I don't know if that's going to light a fire under these players or if that's going to kill their motivation. The current state of these players, some of them I don't think is great. Newers was at one point one of the most feared players, I'd say, from North America, but he hasn't been to an international event in a while to reinforce that. Yaga was really strong about a year ago, but he's been pretty bad in the years since. And Diaz and Gomez, these guys have been playing together forever, and they've been generally pretty solid. But again, Oxygen as a whole, they disappointed me in stage 1. They did really well in round robin, especially at the beginning. They ended up in second place. They weren't able to convert that into a major. They also missed out on Esports World Cup. They had Hat in the qualifiers. They made this change replacing Dream then, but they didn't make the event. And then in wildcard restart, they weren't so good. They were certainly messing around, but to some extent, you have to imagine they were trying. And then as far as the actual change goes, it was a really strange one. A lot of people didn't like it. 1, because a lot of people really like Dream, and 2, because the roles just seem really weird. Dream being that hard support, IGL kind of guy, and then Hat not seeming like he fit those roles, but when we saw them in wildcard restart, it seemed like they were just straight up putting Hat on the hard breach. So I don't know if that's bait. I don't know if that was trying something out, but that's what they were doing. So we'll see how it plays out. Again, I need to be convinced that these guys are able to qualify for international events once again, let alone doing well at them. So we'll have to see. Then we have Luminosity. Hat came from Luminosity. He was replaced by Surf, who has already left the team going to Sonics, who we'll talk about in a little bit. We don't see Surf over here or here. He was only there for the offseason, and they did have a solid offseason. They were one of the 3 North American teams to make it to Esports World Cup. They didn't do amazingly well there, but they didn't go 0-2 at the very least. They got 1 win. And you do have to think that Surf was a pretty big part of that. Came onto the roster, they make it there, and now he's already left for, I guess, greener pastures. This is another team I don't see as a top team, but again, they did surprise making it to Esports World Cup, so I think the potential is sort of there. In stage 1, they didn't look amazing, but it was Kickstro's first stage, it was Wi-Fi's first stage, and Eddie, I guess, and Silent are still fairly new. They bring on Woos, who was certainly one of the more promising T2 players. Maybe not the most promising player, maybe not even the most promising player coming from Makers. We'll see him shortly, but yeah, I guess, you could keep your eye on this team if you like to root for an underdog. I think Luminosity fits all that pretty well. Then we have Dark Zero. Yeah, last 2 teams, and I saved them for the end because this is sort of the big one, minus Canadian plus Kobilax. So Canadian, I thought he was almost like undroppable. I thought he would never leave Dark Zero until he decided to retire, or maybe he decided he wanted to go to another team for some reason, but it sounds like some number of his teammates decided that they didn't want him around anymore, so he was dropped, and Sonic swooped in and picked him up. And I don't really want to go in the specifics of the dropping because there's a bunch of drama surrounding it. If you want to know about that, look up like Canadian and Nafe's Twitters. You could probably also go in the R6 Pro League subreddit and search Canadian and find info on that, but not really what I want to discuss here. Kobilax is being picked up from Makers. and Makers looked like the best T2 team. Kobe Lax looked like probably the most promising T2 player. So if you thought Dark Zero was really good before, but maybe Canadian was holding them back, maybe you're really, really excited for this change. Pound for pound, they have a really good looking roster. I mean, NJR, one of the best players in the world, maybe the best player out of North America, up to interpretation, but I think a lot of people do believe that. Pambazoo, Bolo, Nafe, all really solid players. Maybe they have some off days here or there, but still, generally they perform really well. And then again, Kobe Lax, really exciting pickup. I think the Canadian drop will probably have a lot of ramifications. It'll probably very much impact the play style of this team. This has been Canadian's team for quite a while now, so I have to imagine that their play style will change. And finally, we have Sonics picking up Canadian as well as Surf. So last stage they had Rexin, Ambi, Adam, and Merc, and then Geo played in the regular stage, and then they brought Grixer back off the bench to play in the LCQ. Still not enough to make it to the major. They also didn't make it to Esports World Cup, and so a few changes were in the works. Well, I put minus Geo. I think he might technically still be on their bench, not fully sure, but he's not on the playing roster. I think Adam, really solid player. I don't think he needed to be dropped. Arguably, minus Adam plus Surf is a side grade, but it's entirely possible Surf just works better for this roster as a matter of how vocal he is, his play style, the roles, whatever, and he's certainly a more experienced player. He did just go to Esports World Cup, which is pretty big, but I'm pretty high on both of these guys, so I'm not mad about the change, but I'm not convinced it had to happen. And then we have Merc being dropped, Canadian being picked up, coming over from Dark Zero. So yeah, that gives us Rexin, Grixer, Ambi, Canadian, and Surf. So Canadian, arguably the GOAT of the game, one of the greatest IGLs of all time, certainly the greatest North American IGL. And again, Surf, I think he's been really good. I'm excited for Surf back in T1. He wasn't on any team in stage 1, and he did come over from LG, who he played for in the off season. And then Ambi, I think there's still a lot of untapped potential there, and Rexin and Grixer, maybe they haven't been as good lately as they once were, but I think bringing Canadian onto the roster might be enough to bring them back to their former heights. So I'm really hyped for this team. I've been a Sonics fan for a long time, and that was maybe starting to wane a little bit. I wasn't like super excited for what they had going on recently, but this is a really cool change. This looks like a really strong team, and I mean, even if they don't do well, I think it'll be fun to watch it go down. So that does it for all of the changes in North America, unless there's some absolute last minute curveball. The roster change window has already closed, so somebody would have had to kept things really well under wraps for that to be the case, but I think that does it. So let me know your guys' thoughts. Which changes are you most excited for? Are you absolutely monumentally shocked by the minus Canadian from DZ plus Canadian to Sonic sort of thing? And yeah, that's gonna do it for me. Catch you guys next time.